Greetings, fellow botanists. I'm here to tell you about the structure of a flower. Now, a flower is a reproductive part of a flowering plant. So the purpose of the flower is to produce seeds so that the plant can reproduce. So there are different parts of a flower. Some flowers have just male parts, and some have just female structures. Some, like this one that we'll be looking at, have both male and female structures. So I'm going to show you a few tricks to remembering the names of the different parts. And then in the next slide, you're going to be quizzing yourself. And then again in the following slide after that to get some practice. So let's try to memorize all the parts of a flower, and here are the tricks. All right. So we're first going to talk about the male structures. So these are the male structures. And there are how many of them? There are 6 of them. And so we call these the stamens. And so you can remember stamen because it has the word men in it, right? So that is the male structure. So you can see that there are 6 of them in this flower, and they have these green stalks, and on top of that, they have these reddish tops, all right? So this whole thing is one stamen. And so at the top you have the anther. And the anther is the part that produces the pollen. And the pollen, if you remember, those are the little grains that contain half of the genetic material that the flower is going to need to make a seed. Okay? And then, so the anther is at the top of this green stalk, this green stem of the stamen, and that's called the filament. Okay? So what's one way we can use to remember this? So if you go here, it says SAF, stamen, anther, filament, right? So stamen is the entire structure. The anther is on top of the filament, okay? So stamen has men in the word, and these are the male parts. It includes the filament and the anther, and there are 6 of the stamens here in this flower. And what's the anther? Anther is where the pollen grains form. It's where they're produced, and it's at the tip of the stamen on top of the filament. That's called the anther. That's where the pollen's from, okay? So that's the male structure. So now over to the female part. So here's the female part in the middle here. So the top of this part connects with this stalk here down to where the seed will form, okay? And the name of this entire female structure is called the pistil. Okay, now within the pistil, you have the very top structure, and it's a very important structure, and that's called the stigma. Okay, and we call it the sticky stigma because pollen sticks to it. Okay, in other words, pollen from another flower will land on the stigma, and then the pollen grain, if the pollen grain is accepted, it'll send down a tube through this part, this stalk of the female structure, and that's called the style, right? This long part. And the style connects down to the ovary here. And the ovary is where the eggs are. And if the pollen tube connects, it'll bring the male genetic material down to the other half of the genetic material that the seed will need in the egg and become fertilized. And then that's where the fruit would be made, in the ovary. Okay, so how can we remember what the female structures? The female structure is the pistil, and then we have a stigma, style, and ovary. So how can we remember that? So PSSO. So the pistil is the entire structure. The stigma is the top part, the sticky stigma. The style is the connector between the stigma and the ovary where the seed would form. Okay? PSSO. Now, what's in here? Stigma. Memorization tricks. Mama, right? So stigma, it has the word ma in there. And so mama sounds like mama. And that would be the female parts. It's sticky. Stigma is sticky because pollen sticks to it, right? And how many stigma do you see here? Only one, right there at the top. Okay. Ovary contains the egg, and the egg becomes fertilized if the pollen is able to reach the pollen that lands on the stigma is able to reach its way down into the egg, into the ovary, and it becomes fertilized, and then the ovary develops into a fruit. Okay. So PSSO for the female part. All right. So and then so that we have these parts that are non-reproductive. So these are the leaves underneath the flowers. Those are called sepals, right? They look like leaves that are underneath the flowers. And then you know what these are? Probably they're the petals, right? And you probably heard that word before. So anyway, so thank you very much, botanist, and we'll see you later.